I don't know if you guys can tell right now, but I'm wearing like one of the coolest shirts ever. You guys have a little visual here. You know what? I'm just one step ahead of the fashion trends. That's all I gotta say about that. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Amber Rose, also known as the Religious Hippie. You could basically follow me on any social media platform, or you can go straight to my website at thereligioushippie.com. On my website, you'll find economy rosaries, haters will be prayed for prayer journals, St. Jude prayer mugs, and haters will be prayed for tumblers. So if you guys are interested in helping me keep this ministry running, you can donate and receive one of those items. And if you cannot donate financially, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing to help us with the algorithm. Thanks, guys. Okay, my dudes, so today is a Q&A episode. I've been meaning to do these at least monthly because I know you guys really enjoy these episodes, and I've been slacking recently, so I apologize for that, but we're not slacking today. So I put a Q&A up on my Instagram per usual. So if you guys do want to be a part of these Q&As, my Instagram is the place where you'll be able to enter your question and potentially be on the Q&A. Now, because I get so many of these, I obviously am not able to get to all of them, but I do try to get to as many as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, our first question is from Saul, and he asks, tips for personal growth. I've got a lot to work on. So personal growth is really important, and obviously personal growth also comes with spiritual growth. So also we want to grow in our prayer life, but I'm sure you know that. So in order to grow personally, I do believe that routines are going to be a huge part of that. What I mean is like, being able to go to sleep at a specific time and wake up every single day at a specific time. And the reason I say that is because when we go to bed, how we go to bed is going to dictate how our morning goes. So if we're going to bed at like 12 a.m., we're exhausted, and we know we have to get up at 8 a.m. tomorrow, but we keep scrolling on our phone, then obviously we're going to be tired the next day. We're not going to want to do a lot, and we're not going to be productive. So having a routine of when you go to bed and when you wake up, really, really helpful. Obviously, the weekends are like exempt if you go out with friends for dinner, but getting to bed and getting the amount of sleep that you need every night is going to be very helpful. And then the second thing I would suggest is get a workout routine. And the reason I say this is because as humans, we need to seek out physical labor. Well, at least some of us do. Other people do it actually for their work, but for the most part, the rest of us need to be weightlifting or getting some sort of exercise to make our bodies feel good. And a lot of the times we're not doing that, and so we feel lethargic, our bodies don't feel very good, low dopamine, but getting a good workout routine in is very important. You can go 3 times a week, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to lift tons of weights or anything, but doing a little bit of weightlifting and then walking for 30 minutes or weightlifting for 15 minutes and then walking for 30 minutes, just 30 minutes of exercise in general is going to be really beneficial. And then of course, also eating right is really important too. Cutting out seed oils, artificial flavors, and coloring, especially those dyes wreak havoc on people's systems. So being able to eat well and be able to fuel your body properly is going to be really important. And that leads to my other tip, which is to learn skills. I think so many people don't know how to cook these days. They don't know how to clean. They don't know how to garden or make their own food. And I think that's a lost art because really, we're dependent then on these big corporations to make food for us. And I'm not saying we have to be completely independent of them, but we do need to know how to cook our own food and not rely on, fast food or anything down the street and DoorDash to make our food every day. I'm not saying you do this, but I am saying a lot of people do this. So I think learning skills that are really important in life, like cooking, cleaning, survival skills even, those are my favorite to learn. I did wilderness survival twice, and that was the most fun experience of my life. And then for the spiritual side of stuff, the number one thing I would suggest is to get a regular prayer routine going. And if that's like, waking up and doing a morning offering and then Divine Mercy Chaplet at 3, and then examination of conscience at night, great. I think that's a really good routine. And of course, you can always add stuff throughout the day if you feel called to go to adoration or daily mass, go for it. I definitely think having a routine set in place is going to really help, and adding meditation to that routine is helpful too. I just did a whole podcast with Gabby after hours. Gabriel, he's fantastic. So I'll link that below for you if you want to learn more about mental prayer. but it's the best mental prayer explanation, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it. Now, I don't have an answer for this one, but she asked Catholic fiction book recommendations. Now, I don't read fiction, and I don't know many Catholic book fictions. I know people said the Dune series was really good, but I've never read it, so I can't suggest it personally. I read the Karen series. It's like a trilogy, and I loved that series. It was so beautiful, but it's based on a true story about a little girl with cerebral palsy who's Catholic during like World War II, basically that era. But I don't read too many fiction books anymore, so if you guys have suggestions, please let me know in the comments below so I can send those to her. Okay, Austin asks, I'm struggling to figure out what God's plan is for me. Any tips? So I definitely think this is difficult because everything's going to be in hindsight, and that's hard for us to see because when we're in the moment, we want an answer. That's how our human brains work. But God knows everything, and he's already in control, and he knows what's going on before we know. And so for us, we might be frustrated because we're like, God, what do you want from me now? And honestly, how he answers our prayers is, well, by opening and closing doors for us that we might not see until later. This is why I keep a prayer journal, because I can write down the prayers that I have and, my intentions and everything. And then a month later, I go back and I see how God answered my prayer. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, that's not at all how I would have expected that to go, but I'm so glad it didn't go my way. So a lot of times it can be disheartening because we feel like we don't know what God wants from us. But continuing that prayer routine, going to adoration and mass, and just asking for clarity from God is going to be really helpful because those prayers don't go unanswered, but God doesn't always answer us the way that we want him to or the way we expect him to. So I would suggest starting a prayer journal and just writing down your intentions or your wants or needs or anything like that. And then, continue doing that for a few months and then look back and see how God has answered those prayers. And he might not answer all of them. Or we might feel like he doesn't answer all of them, but then he does, and it's just not in the way we wanted him to. But I definitely think keeping a prayer journal is important to keep track of that. And then we can see our prayers documented and be like, oh yeah, I did pray for that. And that's how this came to fruition and blah, 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 blah. In the words of St. Padre Pio, pray, hope, and don't worry. Ively asks, what is your favorite type of music? So my dad raised me on classic rock. That I think is still till this day my favorite genre of music. I've never had a love for music like I have for classic rock. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, classic rock, that's bad, like da 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 da. And I want to clarify, my dad did not raise me on AC/DC or Metallica or Nirvana or anything like that. He mainly raised me on, the Beatles, Styx, REO Speedwagon, Journey, Triumph, Grand Funk Railroad, Boston, Chicago, all of those classic old bands, and they had so much talent. And still to this day, my dad and I will sit down on the couch and we'll just watch a band play a song. Usually my favorite band, Styx, obviously. Technically Dennis DeYoung and the music of Styx. If you guys know that whole thing, I don't know what side you guys are on, but I'm on Dennis DeYoung's side. But yeah, I was raised on that music, and till this day, that's still my favorite genre. I listen to a whole bunch of different type of music. My mom raised me on like classical and Native American music. My dad definitely took a different approach with like Grand Funk Railroad and Simon and Garfunkel. I usually love all different types of music. I listen to some pop and rock, and the only one that I don't like is rap. I cannot stand rap music, even if it's like good rap music. Well, I guess that's not true because I do listen to Enoch quite a bit. But, just the modern day rap music where the guys are like, it's like, what are you saying? But yeah, I would have to say that rock music, like the classic rock, is my favorite type of music. Okay, Morgan asks, how to tell your anti-Catholic family that you're converting to Catholicism? Ooh, okay, it's a little tricky, and I don't have a whole lot of context here, so I will have to make some assumptions, so I apologize if any of this is wrong. But if it's going to be a huge issue, and you don't live with them anymore, you're on your own, and you're going through with this, and you only see them once in a while, I wouldn't necessarily tell them. Not that like you'd be hiding it from them, but if you don't see them often, you're in a different state, it might just be something you have to wait for until after you're Catholic. and not have all of those arguments going on while you're converting. And the reason I say that is because it's pretty stressful converting as is, learning all that you can in like a year. That's a lot of pressure. And so I don't think you need that extra weight from your family telling you that you shouldn't be converting or trying to, create issues for you or speak about, the misconceptions they have about the church. I think it's a really stressful time. So I would wait until after you convert to tell them. If you do live with them though, and you do see them a lot and it's unavoidable because they're gonna know, I would try and learn as much as I can about the faith and see if maybe you can just sit down with them and just have a conversation about it. Some family are more open to it than others when they find out a family member's converting, and they'll be like, oh, well, why is that? Like, what are you doing? And da-da-da-da-da. They're very sweet about it. Other people, they're going to be a little bit more hostile, and that's really sad in my opinion, but it depends on who your family is. But learn as much as you can about the faith, because then when they do have these misconceptions or they do ask you questions, you're able to answer them and you're able to do it cool, calm, and collected. I think that's another thing, is we really need to show the love of God through us. I don't know if your family's Protestant or just anti-religion altogether, because that also plays a role in how they perceive things. But if you can, I would avoid it until you do convert. And if you can't avoid it, I would learn as much as I can about the faith so I can defend it. But also remember, don't throw your pearls to swine. If you feel like a conversation's not fruitful, it's okay to walk away from that conversation. And it's also okay to say, hey, I don't really know the answer to that, but let me get back to you on that. I think that'll be really good. Honesty and communication are so important. Lori asks, Catholic loved one is getting married outside the church. Would you attend? No, I would not attend. And the whole reason for that is because if she is Catholic, she is committing a mortal sin by being outside the church. If you go to that wedding, you are supporting that mortal sin, whether you are intentionally or not. It's our actions that really show it. If you show up and you're there for it, then you're silently saying like, oh, this is okay, but it's not. And it's for their own good. It's for their soul. And they obviously won't understand that. There's going to be hurt feelings. I've had to go through this with some friends who left the church, and they invited me to their wedding, and I told them I couldn't go. I didn't tell them at the time it was because one of them left the church and was getting married outside the church, just because I wasn't that close with them and I didn't want to create a whole bunch of problems. But if you're closer with the person and they're a family member and a loved one, maybe you can have that conversation with them and just explain to them very lovingly as to why you won't be attending. And don't be like, oh, it's because you're not getting married inside the church and it's like, that's a mortal sin and you guys are going to hell and I can't support blah, 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 blah. But I would be very loving about it, and I would just try to explain your side as best as you can. And sometimes people, it's just not good enough for them and they're going to be upset about that. You are not responsible for how they react. But I think it is important that we don't support that by showing up, and we do hold our ground as Catholics and set those standards. Okay, next up, Mark asks, I'm Protestant but considering Catholicism. Can anyone go to a mass to check it out? Yes, you can absolutely go to a mass and check it out. I highly suggest sitting in the middle, but a little closer to the front so you can still see what's going on, but also be able to follow along with the mass and watch what the other people are doing so you don't get lost with the kneeling and standing and sitting and everything. The only thing is during communion, you will not be able to go up and receive communion, but you can go up and receive a blessing, and you just want to put your hands like this, cross them across your chest, and go up like this. That way the priest knows that you cannot receive communion, but you can still get a blessing, and I think that's beautiful as well. Otherwise, you can just stay in your pew and wait until communion is finished. But yeah, anyone can go, and I highly suggest you do if there's a church nearby. Okay, next up is from Thomas, and he's a seminarian, and he asks, what do you want in a pastor? Now, I already have all of my needs fulfilled through my spiritual director and the pastors at St. John Cantius, but if I didn't have them, I would definitely want someone like them. And so what I mean by that is that they talk about hard topics in their homilies. They talk about birth control. They talk about abortion. They talk about sex outside of marriage, transgenderism. They touch on these topics, and it's in such a loving and convicting way that when they do say it, you feel convicted, but you feel loved. It's almost as though a father is speaking to his child, in a very loving way and being like, hey, I'm doing this not because I hate you, like I love you so much and that's why I'm telling you about this. And so I just love that dynamic between them. And then of course, they're also very goofy. They can, have fun, but I definitely think the main thing I would look for is a priest who is not afraid to speak truth, and a priest who is willing to talk out and also, not be afraid of offending his congregation. And I know that might be a bit of a controversial statement, but honestly, I feel like the congregation sometimes leads the priest's ideals and homilies instead of the priest himself, because he's afraid of offending the congregation or he doesn't want to cause issues. And it's like those people need to hear that loving conviction. And I think that's something that a lot of priests kind of tiptoe around because they don't want to get emails or anything from Susan from the parish council. But I do believe that, having priests who are not afraid to speak truth are going to be the ones who help people the most. And I've witnessed that in my own life. I went to a church for a year where the priest was very, I don't want to say flippant, but he never really spoke about difficult topics. It always kind of revolved around, acceptance and love and la 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 la. And that's not a bad thing, but I think there's love and truth. And if you know how to communicate that, I think that's truly what changes hearts. And when I found Canchas again, because I was raised at Canchas and then I fell away and then I went to this other church for a year and then I found Canchas again because just the watered downness of the faith and everything just was not for me. And I really wanted that traditional aspect of the faith. And so I went back to Canchas and I got that. I got this conviction and it really helped me grow as a Catholic. And so for me, that was really important. So long story short, that's probably what I would want. Our last question is from Olivia. Should I date a lukewarm Catholic? And if so, how? No, do not do that. You're setting yourself up for failure. Please do not pursue a lukewarm Catholic. And the whole reason I say this is because no matter how hard you might try, no matter how hard you might push them to go to Mass and do their prayers, they're not going to do it unless they have a conversion of heart. And they shouldn't be doing it for somebody else. So if you're expecting them to become on fire for their faith because you're dating them and you're on fire for your faith, that's not a good setup, and you shouldn't be expecting that, because then that can cause resentment later when they don't, when they decide, oh no, I'm still lukewarm and that's that. I'll be honest here, and again, this is going to be another controversial statement that I'll probably get dragged through the mud on. I think lukewarm Catholics are worse than Protestants. I truly, truly do, because they have the faith, they're in the faith, and they know the faith, and they have every resource available, and yet they're still actively disregarding God. So basically, it's just not a good idea. You don't want to do that. And at the end of the day, it's best to find someone who is on fire for their faith and isn't going to put God on the back burner. With all that being said, guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye! If you guys liked this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. If you'd like to see more content from me, you can follow me on Instagram, X, or Facebook at The Religious Hippie, and you can find me on Spotify or wherever else you hear your podcasts at A Catholic's Perspective. Bye, guys!